Hello, welcome to Revenant Reads. I'm Vin, and this is the Books and Life tag. So this tag was created by Steve Donoghue, and I was tagged by him for this. Um, he tagged a little over a week ago. I'm finally getting to it. I'm still slowly catching up to tags, but this one seemed like one I could do quick enough without a bunch of props as well. I do try to get some props sometimes when I do tags, but this one is not entirely necessary. And this is something that he created to try and just find out more about people's bookish lives. So we're going to go through the prompts. I believe there's 11 here. So the first one is, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being a normal person and 10 being the late Harold Bloom, how much are books and reading a part of your life? Well, considering I have a booktube channel, that's got to put me at least, I guess, around a 5, maybe. Certainly way higher than a normal person. However, I have a lot of other priorities in my life. My job, I'm a full-time teacher, which I would love to say is just tons of reading, but of course, we know it's not. It's it's a lot of walking around a room, talking, communicating, solving problems, grading, etc., etc. I have 2 young children. I have a house. I have pets. I have a property I have to mow. Got a grocery shop. I got a lot of other responsibilities. So I try to fit in reading whenever I can. So do I make it an absolute priority every single day? No, but I do try to set aside time each day. Usually multiple times a day. I usually can't just sit down and block my kids out for long stretches. But I'll take a little bit of time here, a little bit of time there, morning, afternoon, evening, and get some reading done. And that usually, I can sometimes get a good chunk in. So I guess around a 5 is what I'd say. Number 2, where does your personal library stand right now in relation to the rest of your life? Do you have more books now than you ever have? Fewer? How has your library changed? I do have more books now than ever. I actually have a library in the house, slash study, I guess you could say, but I like to call it the library. I always dreamed of having a library, so I'm going to take that title. I also have a cabinet with glass doors right off to our living room, which is kind of like my horror studies cabinet, where I have horror fiction, but also like film studies and things like that related to horror. And I have this room, which is my bedroom, which is kind of my TBR. So I've got I just went through and counted, around 275 books in here. So again, it's a big TBR. And one of the reasons I like to have them here and I can see them is because for me, it's out of sight, out of mind. I want a daily reminder of the things that I want to read, and that's how I continue reading. If I were to take a book and put it down in the library, which I don't do until I've read it. So right now, my library has close to 700 books in there. I've read almost all of those books. I don't like to mix up the books that I haven't read with the books that I have, because again, if I don't see it, I'm not going to get to it. So my horror cabinet, I've got over 100 books in there. So when I added everything up, it came to a little over 1,000 books that I have. Most of which, of course, I've read, except for the couple hundred in here, which it doesn't look like 200 and something books, but it's shocking when you actually start adding these things up. And has it changed? Yeah, I guess it has. I've certainly expanded the things that I read, what I read about. I actually have a physical library now, and I have the horror cabinet, so I have different areas. I didn't even count. I forgot about it. Out in the hallway upstairs, I have a small bookcase just of Star Trek books that I want to read. So, yeah, it's higher, actually, that number of books. But we try to keep it tasteful. Try not to have the books take over everything. I don't have books, just stacked up all over the place or anything like that. It's nice and neat. But yeah, it's the biggest library I've ever had, and I do sometimes unhaul things. Number 3, take a mental step back and ask yourself, what is the most likely first bookish impression a newcomer would have in your home? I think we always I think most people who have their libraries, they, you know, maybe fantasize a little bit about somebody walking into your library being like, wow, and then they start looking along the shelves, and you strike up conversations, and that never happens. If the people notice the books, I might get a question of, have you read these? And if I'm in the library, I can say yes. um, but most of the time they don't even comment on them. They'll comment on the shelves, or something else that I have in there, not the books at all. They even my more bookish friends almost never care at all what's on the shelves. So yeah, I mean, if somebody noticed the books, and they would know that I like to read and that I like books, it pretty much never goes beyond that, though. If they bother to look at the shelves and they know what kind of stuff I read, but that doesn't happen. Number 4, how often, if ever, gulp, do you clean or reorganize your books? I rarely ever reorganize them. Clean them, not often enough. I'm not even sure how often you're supposed to clean them. I certainly, usually, every summer, I'll do a nice clean through. In the winter, a less than nice thorough clean through. But otherwise, it's a little bit of a dusting here and there. And it's not all that often, I gotta say. Number 5, on average, how many books do you acquire in a given week? So if we're averaging things, I'll go many weeks without acquiring anything. And then if I go to like a library book sale, well, I'll suddenly acquire a whole lot. Just before I filmed this, I filmed a video about some books that I bought at a local bookstore, which I got 3 books, which is very rare for me. That almost never happens, where I'm paying full price in bookstores for things. But I kind of wanted to support the local business, especially, they seem to be doing okay during COVID at this point, as restrictions are releasing. But I wanted to give some money locally, so I didn't mind doing it. So if I was going to average everything out, maybe 1 book a week, that would mean I'd have 52 books new a year. So I don't know if I get that many new books in a year. That I purchase myself. Maybe I'm given books. Maybe that's about right. So about a book a week on average. Number 6, what song is your current earworm? The one that I've had stuck in my head is it's a Dutch gothic metal band called Blackbriar. The female vocalist, they released an album earlier this year, and there's one song on there called Seance, where the singer is, the story is that she's basically a ghost at a seance, and she's trying to communicate with the people who are at the seance, and their skepticism is frustrating her, because she's doing all these tricks, but they don't believe in ghosts, so she's trying to convince them that she's actually there. And it's not even my favorite track on the album. I really like the first track, Confess, and Selkie's a really good one about this kind of maritime horror story almost. Not even horror, it's more like tragic love story. But she does this thing inside this song Seance where she kind of like mimics the ooh of ghosts, that kind of very stereotypical howling. And she does that in the chorus, and the first time I heard it kind of threw me off, but now like that's all I hear in my head is that chorus of her doing that thing with her voice. So I guess that's my earworm. That's the thing that won't leave. And I'll leave a link for that in the description. Number 7, what percentage of your self-control do you retain in a well-stocked bookshop? Like I said, if it's a library book sale and the books are like $1, something around there, not a ton of self-control. I just fill up my bag or 2. If I'm inside a used bookstore and things are cheaper, then I'm fairly restrained, but I'm probably going to walk out with a few things. If it is a full-price bookstore, I'm pretty restrained. Usually I only get 1. Like I said, the video that I made about this week's trip is a very rare exception. Usually I might get one thing from a bookstore in that case. And also, I'm usually there with my wife and my two kids, so my wife is trying to kind of play, interception while I can actually look through the books. And I'm often being hurried inside bookstores. I don't get the luxury of just kind of hanging out and looking through everything that they have. So yeah, I'd say my self-control is pretty good in those situations. Number 8, do you ever feel the need to take a break from books? If so, what form does it take? I have involuntary breaks imposed on me anyway, so no, I don't feel like I have to take a break from books. There are certainly times where I don't feel like reading a book, even though I have the time. That does happen sometimes. If I do that, I might listen to music, or I don't watch a lot of TV during the day. I usually watch a movie at night after we put my kids to bed. So yeah, it might just be music or something like that I'll listen to. Number 9, when you meet a new person, how long does it take you to bring up books? Almost never. Unless they bring it up first, I usually just assume that they don't read. As a teacher, I usually will assume that my coworkers are readers. Of course, they're telling children that the students that they should be reading. Unfortunately, I find that many coworkers don't read, don't seem to have a high estimate of having books in their daily lives. So the only time I ever talk books with people generally is if there's some kind of correlation to something that we're talking about in a work environment. But I don't often talk books with people, because even if they are readers, we often don't read the same thing. So it doesn't come up very often, which is one of the reasons why I started a booktube channel. Number 10, have you given any thought or made any provisions for your personal library after you croak? No. If I croak tomorrow, I assume that my stuff is pretty much going to be donated. If my kids get old enough and they end up wanting the books, of course it'll go to them. But I get a lot of secondhand books. Steve mentions this in his original tag video. You see people's collections when you're going through a secondhand shop, and you know that these are people who have most of the time passed, and and they've lovingly put their names or a library plate or something like that in the beginning of the book, and they obviously had great care for that item, and now it is inside a library book sale amongst thousands of books, and if it's not sold, it's probably going to be in the trash. So I don't have any kind of misgivings or delusions about what's going to happen with my library. I know it's going to be completely separated and donated, and most of the stuff will probably end up in the trash because it is not something of wide interest for the most part. There have been times when I've, out of curiosity, Googled the person if there's a name and an address inside the used book that I buy, and sometimes I come across the obituaries, and it gives me a little bit of insight into that person and that book's history. But yeah, I know exactly where my books are going to end up. The last one. Are you known among your friends and loved ones for your weird and probably unhealthy relationship with books? I think to a certain extent, my family certainly knows that I love books. So yes, they know that. My friends know I like books. I don't know if they consider it an unhealthy relationship. Most of my friends also like books, even if they don't maybe read as much or as widely as I do. They definitely appreciate and value books, and they do pick them up and they do read them. So I don't know if that's the first thing I'm associated with, though. I think maybe being a horror fan is something that they think of more quickly when they think of me. It's certainly the kind of thing, like, horror films come up in conversation way more than books do. They know that I co-host a horror movie discussion podcast, the Horror Cast. Been doing that for quite a few years now. And if they come into my home, they usually ignore the books, but people will notice the horror movie posters and stuff like that that are on the walls in the living room and in the kitchen. So that usually gets a lot more attention. So yeah, people who know me know that I like books, but that's probably not the first thing they think of. And that's it. Those are the prompts. That was the Books and Life tag, again, created by Steve Donoghue. So, yeah, thanks, Steve, for creating it and for tagging me. And, yeah, it was a nice, easy tag. So, next time. All right. Thank you, BookTube.